So I tend to find that there are two kinds of people in the world. There's the kind of person who hates Bubsy, and there's the kind of person who's never heard of Bubsy. That seems to be it. And I don't think that Bubsy really gets a fair rap. I think that it's been a bit harsh on Bubsy over the years, and I want to talk about why. I want this to be a bit more of a balanced review of the Bubsy series, because it usually just gets beaten on. And it's understandable why. It has a lot of problems, but I think that people focus on the negatives. And actually, I'd heard a lot about Bubsy. I'd heard that Bubsy was terrible. The first game, the 3D game, like people tell me, and I've seen images, and I've watched other YouTube videos, and I've seen people really rag on this series. And I thought, I'm interested to try that. I'm going to give it a go. So I downloaded Bubsy Twofer off of Steam, which is the first two games. I got hold of a copy of Bubsy 3D. And I've also played some of the more recent ones as well, all in research for this, because I wanted to know, is Bubsy truly terrible? So let's talk about Bubsy. Okay, so the first Bubsy was Bubsy Bobcat, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? It came out in 1993. Basically, the game's creator, Michael Berlin, had seen Sonic the Hedgehog, fell in love with it. He also fully enjoyed things like Mario, and they hyped up his creation, Bubsy, as being like the thing to beat Sonic the Hedgehog. It was hugely hyped. It was also reviewed quite well when it actually released, because people play it now and they say the controls are terrible. They're not great. Bubsy's got a lot of momentum, which is hard to control. Once you get the hang of it, the game's fine. I don't really see what the problem is. People complain that Bubsy dies in one hit. That is a pain, I've got to admit. There's no way of... You can protect yourself, but not much. I've heard people, though, complain about having to take tiny steps through the level just to make it, and falling kills you immediately, so you can't jump and all this stuff. I think they're exaggerating. When I played it, I discovered that if you press on my Xbox, it is the Y button, I think, it makes you glide. And if you glide, you don't take fall damage. It also helps you control your jumps. Really, I don't understand why people are complaining so much. It plays perfectly fine for a game of its time. I mean, I think Zool is harder to control than Bubsy, so I honestly think that the original Bubsy game is unfairly lambasted, because the controls are not that bad. He's hard to control when you're doing close platforming. Because you can't, if you put too much forward momentum into a jump, it's hard to cancel that momentum, but then just don't put that much momentum in. I really don't see what the problem is. And there's a lot to love about Bubsy. The animations are fantastic, the character himself is so expressive, so much more interesting than others at the time. Yeah, he's very verbose. You're either going to love that or hate it. Especially if you die a lot, you're going to hear a lot of the same quips. But it's very unique, and Bubsy at least has a very well-defined character, unlike, let's say, certain other characters of his era. So there's a lot to like about Bubsy if you're willing to. Oh, I should also mention that there was a TV pilot for a cartoon series that never got off the ground. You can find it on YouTube, but don't. It's really bad. So a year later, in 1994, they released Bubsy 2. They rushed it out. Bubsy 1 did great. People actually liked it. It's funny that people don't like it now, because it was well received. Bubsy 2 was made by a development company that, by this point, the original creator wasn't on board, and the people who made it didn't like Bubsy very much. They rushed it out, they bashed it out, and, I mean, honestly, it's not that different. It still plays virtually the same as the first one. The controls haven't really been improved very much, but Bubsy has been given health points so that he doesn't die immediately. The levels are also quite a bit bigger. The game has a more open world feel to it, so you can choose where you go, what stages you play, and a lot of the levels are a lot more vertical as well. There's a lot more exploration to be done in the levels. Personally, I don't like that. I prefer games to have linear stages. I like Sonic the Hedgehog because you go from the start to the finish, and there's fun to be had along the way. I find that Bubsy 2 has me struggling to figure out where the switch is to open the door. So, yeah, there's that. There are some interesting sections with Bubsy 2 as well. There are mini-games, there are space shooter sections. Like, they did put some work into this thing. And, again, it's actually pretty okay. Like, I really didn't have any problem with it. You could consider it an improvement on Bubsy 1. Personally, I still prefer Bubsy 1. I think it's a more pure experience, and I prefer the graphic style of Bubsy 1, but that's just a personal thing. Again, it's fine. I mean, as long as you are prepared to sort of work with it a little bit, and yeah, alright, you shouldn't really have to say that about a game, but people's expectations of a game now are different to people's expectations then. If you consider that the controls are what they are and just deal with it, you'll be fine. So, Bubsy 2. Also, Bubsy 2 had a Game Boy version. I have not actually played that. I mean, apparently, from what I can tell, it's 3 of the stages from Bubsy 2. And it's about the same, probably a bit worse. It probably wasn't worth putting on the Game Boy, but at the time that's what you did. So there is a Game Boy version of it. Seek that out if you're curious, I guess. So, in '94 as well, they also released Bubsy Fractured Furry Tales. Now, this is one that I haven't played. I wasn't able to track down a copy of this. This came out for the Atari Jaguar. As I understand it, the game is, storyline-wise, it has something to do with fairy tales. I don't really know. Basically, it's Bubsy 1. Like, it's very, very, very similar to Bubsy 1. Some people even say it's basically the same game. So I didn't really think I was missing out on much by not playing that one. It seems like the Bubsy series did quite well initially, and tried to capitalise on that as quickly as possible, and didn't do too badly, but also they really should have taken more time, crafted some better games over a longer period. But this is where it gets really interesting, and I think when people talk about Bubsy, it's Bubsy 3D that they really want to talk about. A lot of people really rag on Bubsy 3D. This is the one. People talk about this as being one of the worst video games of all time. And again, I can't agree with that. Look, it's bad. I'm not going to deny that. I mean, it's not great, but by goodness, it's not as bad as people said. So people talk about it because the controls are terrible, the camera's terrible, the graphics are terrible. I mean, right. Think about it this way. This game came out in 1996. It was actually developed around about the same time as Mario 64. By which I mean it wasn't developed after Mario 64. We all know Mario 64 because that's the game that it was a seminal game. It kind of defined what a 3D platformer should and could be. Nintendo nailed it. They figured out a really good method for using cameras. They figured out a really loose, easy way of controlling characters and displaying environments, giving players control of the camera, as mentioned before. So Nintendo kind of knocked it out of the park with that one. Most people agree Mario 64 is great. Bubsy 3D was developed at the same time. The development staff working on the game, which included Bubsy's original creator, Michael Berlin, they had not played Mario 64. They didn't even know it existed. When they went to a games expo to show their new game, Bubsy 3D, expecting to blow the games industry out of the water, they were horrified to find Nintendo there with their brand new game, Mario 64. And unfortunately, a lot of people thought that Bubsy 3D was a copycat. And it simply wasn't. And if you take it in isolation and think about it as a game in its own right, they came up with some amazing ideas. And actually, if anything, I do genuinely think that they had some solutions to issues that Nintendo hadn't found yet. So to be specific, a lot of people don't like the fact that in Bubsy, players can't control the camera. And yeah, alright, when you first play it, that is a kind of a pain, because the camera sits right down low behind Bubsy, and it makes it hard to see enemies coming up. So Bubsy himself actually blocks your view of what's coming, and that is a pain. that's a nuisance. The camera should have sat higher up, really. But enemies aside, when it comes to the platforming, Bubsy actually is better, in my opinion, than Mario 64 and a lot of modern-day platformers, 3D platformers. Because one of the problems you have in 3D platformers is judging distances. There's no depth perception in video games. And so the only way that you can really tell how far something is apart from something else in 3D space displayed on a 2D screen is to keep moving the camera, because then you'll see them moving relative to each other and you'll get a gist of how far apart they are. And in Mario and a lot of modern 3D platformers, the control is left to the player where the camera is concerned. So if a player isn't aware of that, or doesn't move the camera enough, or doesn't position it well, the player's going to fall foul of that gap. And that is arguably on the player, and therefore fair. But I would also point out that the way that Bubsy does it, and a lot of people don't like this because it gives them motion sickness, but the camera pitches straight up whenever you jump in Bubsy, giving you a top-down view. And I find that immensely useful. It is your only way of controlling the camera, so you can use it to look around. And you can use it to judge distances, and I haven't got a problem with that. I can see where I'm going now, thanks. Like, when it points the camera straight down as I jump, it allows me to position myself when I land, and that's the other thing that Bubsy has going for him, is that you can control him in mid-air really well. When he jumps, you can adjust his jump forward, backwards, and side to side as he falls. You can see his shadow, you can see him, you can see the platform, and you can position him dead on. I haven't had a single problem platforming in Bubsy 3D. Also, he has a ledge grab ability, which has a pretty big hitbox, so if you're near the edge of a platform, he will grab it. And again, I don't see why people complain. Bubsy 3D is actually pretty fun. I've had a good time with it, and I've been able to blaze through the stages without much problem. The graphics are bad. The graphics are very plain. The environments don't look very good. But Bubsy does look good. Look at his face. Look how expressive he is. Again, he had a lot going for him that other characters didn't have going. If you look at Mario in Mario 64, the detail on the character is decent, but, you know, Mario isn't expressive at all. He doesn't need to be, but Bubsy does, and they nailed it. This character is so interesting to look at, and the way he behaves. He had 100 different bloomin' death animations, which you're gonna see, to be fair, because it is a tough game, one way or the other. Another thing that I really loved about Bubsy 3D when I was playing it is the cutscenes. Fully animated and totally adorable, but in particular I like the little cutscenes between stages. They reminded me of the cutscenes in Pac-Man. They're just these little old-style cartoon skits like Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, and they are great. It actually gave me reason to want to complete the stages, besides just getting through the game and having a good time. I wanted to see what the next cutscene was, because they're hilarious. I really enjoyed them. So, I still think there's a lot to like in Bubsy 3D, and I'm not going to convince most people. I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm just saying that people don't really mention this stuff. People don't look at how they did a good job of this thing. Like, they work hard on it, and it's actually pretty decent. Whether or not you can actually get on with it as a player, that's up to you. The main problem I have with Bubsy in Bubsy 3D, the main criticism I have for it, is the same criticism that I have for Bubsy 1, the original game, and that is that Bubsy's momentum kind of sticks to him. So when you press forwards, he starts running forwards, and if you let go of forwards, he's going to carry on running for a little while. But if you try and pull back, he's going to fight you on it. It's like there's a number that's building up, and in order to go in the opposite direction, you have to wait for that number to go all the way back down again. Like, you can't just cancel his momentum, you've got to wind him down. And that is tricky for platforming. It's the only time I did have a problem with the platforming in Bubsy 3D, actually, was when I had to make a very long jump. And I put a lot of forward momentum into that jump. I made the platform, but then I, like, skid straight off the other side of it. So there is that. You know, as I said, Bubsy 3D is very far from being a truly good game. But I think a lot of people are too hard on it. Skip forward to 2017, quite a long time since '96. I'm sure you'll agree. Bubsy basically didn't survive his move to 3D. Nobody liked it at the time, nobody likes it now, apart from me, apparently. And, and yeah, a games company called Black Forest Games makes a brand new Bubsy game. Now, Black Forest Games, I've got a lot of respect for these guys. These people are basically like keeping alive old game franchises. Thank you for Gianna Sisters. I freaking love that as well. And they made a brand new Bubsy game, and it's pretty damn good. It's not great. Again, it's a thing about Bubsy is that he never seems to hit everyone's receptors, if you see what I mean. Like, people just don't have a bit of a blind spot for him. When I looked at the reviews for Woolies Strike Back, none of them really criticised the gameplay, the core thing of all games. None of them really complained about that, and I can tell you why. It's because it's fine. Only it's a three world platform game with 3 bosses. I mean, I finished it in about 2 hours, probably less. I don't know. It didn't take me very long to complete the whole game, but I had a good time whilst I was doing it. It's a pretty bog standard platformer, but with Bubsy and Bubsy's characters. The environments could have been a bit more wacky, you know. I think the problem I have with Woolies Strike Back is that they played it way too safe. But I also understand why they did that. There's Bubsy they're dealing with, you know, that they were treading carefully, and that's fair enough. I still have fun with it. It plays quite a lot like the first Bubsy, but with good controls. They fixed his momentum. He doesn't die from falling. Everything you'd want from a platformer, his hair. He doesn't die on one hit anymore. This is a really good Bubsy game. This is what Bubsy should have been. It's 2.5D, so it's relevant to today. It looks good. It plays well. I just absolutely haven't got a problem with this game. It's perfectly fine. Again, the main issue I have with it is it's a little bit small, and it just slightly lacks the personality that Bubsy had. Although it does have a verbosity meter, which allows you, by default it's cranked way down, so Bubsy barely talks, but if you crank it up, the top level is just Bubsy, and it's just him prattling on throughout the entire game, which of course most people are going to find irritating, but it's Bubsy. Like, why are you playing a Bubsy game if you're not going to listen to this idiot rattle on? He's pretty funny. Like, some of the stuff he comes out with is pretty funny in my opinion. He's always been pretty good actually. I like leaving him standing and just listen to the crap he comes out with.
I think I'm way less annoying than I used to be. I'd really hate to, fall back into old habits. Just so you know!
But what was interesting was when I read the reviews for this game, they all complained about Bubsy not being relevant. They were pretty much just saying, why bring back Bubsy? Nobody wants a new Bubsy game. And that was their main complaint, was just, we don't like Bubsy? And I thought, well, that's not really a relevant complaint, is it? And yeah, okay, the gameplay in this one was sort of bland, but it scored so harshly, and I thought if they put a different character in this thing, it would have scored much more average to medium average. In 2019, Choice Provisions released Bubsy Paws on Fire. Paws on Fire, okay, right, Choice Provisions are the guys who did Bit Trip. Okay, they did the Bit Trip runner games, and Paws on Fire is a running game. So if you like that style of gameplay, brilliant. Check this out, because it's made by people who are great at making that kind of game. And this is a great game. Like, regardless of what you think of Bubsy, for one thing, I went into this, this was the first game that I played on this list, and I'd never played a Bubsy game before when I played Paws on Fire, so I didn't go into it with any bias. I didn't already like Bubsy. I went in curious about Bubsy. I was like, well, it looks kind of good. I actually felt kind of dirty buying it, because I was like, ooh, this is a really maligned character. Like, is this going to be excruciating? And I played it, and yeah, obviously Bubsy is kind of excruciating, but what's funny is that the other characters all think he is as well. So there's a lot of humour in this game, a very meta humour, and I started to feel like Bubsy is kind of like the Deadpool of the games world. You got Mario's the Superman, Sonic's the Batman, Bubsy's Deadpool, and yeah, I know, I just did Marvel and DC there, but who cares? That's my point. Paws on Fire is a lot of fun, and it actually changed my mind on running games, because I tried the Bit Trick games and I found them to be, I wasn't very good at them basically. Bubsy has much more of a difficulty curve, so it's easy for newbies to get into it, and then the difficulty gradually ramps up as the game goes on. The second boss in that game, oh my days, that was hardcore. I haven't included any footage here of my actual gameplay because it's all on Switch, so this is the trailer for the game. But Paws on Fire is finally like a game that most people can agree is pretty okay. Like, it's pretty good. It's not stellar, not every game can be, and Bubsy's had a hard run of it, but the conclusion to this video basically is that no, the Bubsy games have not been really very good, but they certainly haven't been as bad as people say they are, and I think that it's about time someone, and in this case apparently it's me, just points out that there are good things about these games. The original Bubsy had beautiful animation, really nice graphics, and didn't play as badly as people claim. As long as you understand the controls and you get the gist of how the game works, it's really not that bad. Just glide to cancel the fall damage. I mean, I don't understand why people keep complaining about that. It is weird that there's fall damage, to be fair, but still. I think Bubsy 3D doesn't play like 3D platformers that most people are used to, but that doesn't make it bad, it just makes it different. So get used to its rules, and it actually isn't all that bad. I really haven't had that much of a problem with it. Willy Strike Back is just a bit bland, but again, it's a valiant effort, and it's still got a lot of character and a lot of charm to it. And Bubsy Paws on Fire is a successful game. It's actually good. It's actually fun. If you're interested in a good time, just a fun cartoon game, have a go at that. It's not very expensive, I don't think. It's available on quite a lot of different consoles. Might be a good place to sort of get to know Bubsy, and I'm hoping that they're going to keep doing this. I'd like to see more of Bubsy in the future. I think that there's a future for this guy, and I think that they need to kind of figure out what they're going to do with his personality, because he is a little bit grating. So they either need to go Woolies strike back on him and like dial it right down, or Bubsy Paws on Fire is much more old school Bubsy in terms of his personality. They've also brought back a lot of the characters from the TV pilot, which I thought was very cool, and they made Bubsy much more egregious. Keep him at that level. I think that's perfectly fine. Or go full Conker's Bad Fur Day on this guy. Have him go right off the rails. Like, I'd love to see a game where Bubsy just loses it, because he's got every right to. So I've been Scarecrow85. I hope this has been interesting to you. Obviously this much positivity in a YouTube video isn't going to go down very well on YouTube, so please by all means tell me why I'm wrong in the comments section. Like this video if you fancy it, subscribe to my channel because I'm doing my best here, guys, in amongst the lockdown, banging out some videos for you. Thanks for sticking around, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.